Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Andrew Davenport, Mayor of Whitehorse, and I welcome you to tonight's Ordinary Council meeting. I remind councillors and officers that the meeting is being recorded and the audio recording will be made publicly available on our website tomorrow. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate and decision making and encouraging openness and transparency. However, council accepts no liability for any individual opinions or statements. I remind councillors and officers to please speak. Please ensure that your microphone is on when speaking. I formally open this council meeting and ask that you all stand for the opening prayer and statement. We give thanks, O God, for the men and women of the past whose generous devotion to the common good has been the making of our city. Grant that our own generation may build worthily on the foundations they have laid. Direct our minds that all we plan and determine is for the well-being of our city. Amen. In the spirit of reconciliation, Whitehorse City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Please be seated. I would now like to introduce our councillors and senior officers here this evening. Councillors on my left, Councillor Raylene Carr.
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you.
Councillor Bill Bennett.
Good evening and welcome.
Councillor Blair Barker.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome.
Councillor Tina Liu.
Welcome everyone, great to see you tonight.
Councillor Sharon Ellis.
Good evening everyone, welcome.
Councillors on my right, Councillor Prue Cutts.
Good evening everyone and welcome.
Councillor Ben Stennett.
Good evening everyone, welcome.
Councillor Denise Massoud.
Good evening everybody, it's good to see you, thank you.
Councillor Andrew Munro.
Good evening all and a warm welcome.
Staff on my left, Acting Chief Executive Officer Mr Jeff Green.
Good evening.
General Manager Infrastructure Mr Nigel Brown.
Good evening.
General Manager Corporate Services Mr Peter Smith.
Good evening.
Staff on my right, Acting Executive Manager Governance and Customer Service Ms Jenny Russell.
Evening.
Acting Team Leader Governance Mr Ralph Anania.
Good evening.
Acting General Manager City Development Ms Kim Marriott.
Good evening.
General Manager Human Services Ms Terry Wilkinson.
Good evening.
And in the gallery, Manager Communications Ms Sally Freud. Item number 2 on the agenda, apologies, there are none this evening. I'll go on to item number 3, disclosures of conflict of interest. Councillors and officers, are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest in regards to matters to be considered on tonight's agenda? If so, I will require a disclosure of that interest and nature of that interest. There being none, item number 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, we have listed on the agenda the minutes from our last meeting requiring confirmation by council. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the ordinary and confidential council meeting held on 17th of September 2018?
Happy to move.
Councillor Carr moved. Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Bennett seconded. Is there any discussion? Put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item number 5. Responses to questions. Council provides the opportunity for anyone present in the gallery to submit a question in writing on the forms provided, for which we will endeavour to provide a response. I will ask the Acting Chief Executive Officer whether there are any questions submitted.
Through the Mayor, we have one question tonight from Kevin Earl of 12 Poplar Street. Kevin, you're in the audience, yes? The question is, if a hazard is reported to council and the council refuses to fix the hazard, is council liable? My answer to that is there's a number of factors to consider, including the nature of the hazard and also whether there are relevant standards or requirements relating to any such hazard. So without knowing that information, I'd have to take that question on notice, and perhaps Mr Earl could provide a bit more detail on the nature of the hazard he's referring to. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any further questions?
That is all, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Councillor Barker.
I have a procedural motion.
Yes, Councillor Barker.
that notice of motion 114, Councillor Barker, be deferred for consideration immediately following item 9.1.3, which is in relation to 152 Dorking Road and 65 Twyford Street in Box Hill North. Amendment to the current permit, Mayor.
Is there a seconder for that procedural motion?
Happy to second.
Councillor Barker, your moving speech.
It's simply procedural in the order of the meeting tonight, Mr Mayor. My motion is relevant to item 9.1.3, but item 9.1.3 needs to be decided before I can get to my motion, Mayor.
Okay, anything further to add, Councillor Ellis?
Not at all, Mr Mayor.
Any speakers against the motion? Any in favour? I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. I'll therefore, given that procedural motion has passed and notices a motion, item number 6 only had that one particular item, I'll move on to item number 7, petitions. Councillors, do we have any petitions to be tabled tonight? There being none, I'll move on to item 8, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business this evening? No urgent business. Item number 9, council reports. Councillors, we have a number of reports to consider tonight listed under City Development, Infrastructure, Human Services and Corporate. I will introduce each report in the order listed and then call for a motion in regards to the item. Item 9.1.1, 15 McKeon Road, Mitcham. Seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Stannett seconded. Councillor Cutts.
Thank you, Mayor. This development proposal is in relation to 15 McKeon Road in Mitcham and is to construct a 3-storey building to be used as a medical centre, which is existing on the base floor, and then to put 2 additional floors on top of this on the upper floors. The recommendation I'm seeking for councillors to support is that this is refused, and on the basis that, 1, this is not an acceptable solution and will unreasonably impact on the neighbourhood character and amenity of adjacent properties, and further on, because this is in a high section of Mitcham. 2, issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit under the Whitehorse planning scheme because, 1, the proposal does not meet the objectives of the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 4, as the building has not been designed to improve the economic viability, as both the stories above are actually designed for residential use. Secondly, the 3-storey building would be prominent, out of place and inconsistent with the role of this small neighbourhood activity centre. This is a 1A activity centre, which is the smallest there is in the City of Whitehorse planning scheme. There are 24 of these across our whole municipality and 9 within the city of within the Springfield ward. And of those 9 in the Springfield ward, there are 4 on major roads, there are 2 on collector roads, and there are 3 in small residential streets. And this happens to be in a small residential street in a quiet part of Mitcham. Next point is the proposed 3-storey building would not fit into the prevailing streetscape rhythm, the building scale and height of the adjoining and adjacent buildings. It also fails to provide for safe and convenient access to and egress from the laneway. This is a commercial 1-zone group of 8 shops in a row, which are a very standard. They look exactly the same as each other pretty much, and they are within a neighbourhood residential zone, which is mainly single and double-storey dwellings. The consultation forum for this year was held on the 20th of July with a total of 27 objections which were received. The application was advertised on the 20th of July. The objections raised issues with regard to neighbourhood character, parking, traffic and amenity impacts. The consultation forum was held on the 21st of August, chaired by our Mayor, Councillor Andrew Davenport, at which Councillor Stennett and I attended, and we decided to call this matter in for a council meeting. mainly because this particular application was similar, a very similar one to this was also raised with council last year. This subsequently was passed with a notice of decision from council, and then it was taken to VCAT with the member making comments on this particular development, that this was an inappropriate development for a number of reasons, and as a consequence, council's decision was set aside. It has now come up to council for another decision, and that's why Councillor Stennett and I have brought it up today. This particular application is very similar to the one from last year, and as a consequence of that, officers have made the recommendation that this original proposal has not actually addressed in sufficient detail the points made at the VCAT decision of last year. And overall, the decision, it does set an important direction for both the applicant and planning officers in the matters to be considered. However, in this instance, the proposal has not appropriately addressed the requirements and direction provided by the planning scheme, nor has it given the necessary consideration to the matters identified by VCAT. And as a consequence of that, given that the report is here and everyone can read that, I ask councillors to please refuse this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutts. Councillor Stennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'd just like to echo Councillor Cutts' words, but also just go a little bit more into the fact that, it's quite an important fact that Councillor Cutts has mentioned about the previous VCAT decision. The fact is the current application is very similar to what was considered at VCAT, and if this were to go to VCAT, it's my belief that VCAT would treat this as a repeat application, and VCAT aren't really generally in favour of, they take a pretty dim view of repeat applications, as I understand. So it would be in the applicant's best interest to consider what council and VCAT have now said to them about this application. There are a number of points in the council report that the council planners have referred to in terms of the previous VCAT decision and what the tribunal was not satisfied with, and the issues in particular with the DD04 framework, and particular concerns that were noted by the council planners and VCAT. So I'm happy to support the refusal of the council officer recommendation here, and suggest to the applicant that they rethink their plans and their designs.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no speakers for or against, I'm going to put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.1.2, 28 Thomas Street, Mitcham. I seek a mover.
Mayor, I have an alternate motion.
Alternate from Councillor Cutts. Can I ask that the alternate's put on the screen? While the alternate's being put on the screen, Councillor Cutts, can you please briefly indicate what the alternate is about?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's simply to have three additional points made. One is B.1.D is alteration of the front fence to 1.2 metre high vertical timber batten fence, and disregard the rest of what has been written in the papers. And secondly, which is the most important one, is all vertical cladding on external elevations to be replaced with horizontal cladding material. And the third thing is 2D to be deleted, which is regarding the planting along the front boundary fence.
Is there a seconder for the alternate?
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Stennett. Councillor Cutts, moving speech, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This recommendation is for the responsible authority council to grant the permit for the demolition of the existing house and construction of a new single dwelling on the lot and tree removal, to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit under the Whitehorse planning scheme with regards to the items on the agenda and the other points which are made there. This relates to, once again, an item which came up in last year's council meeting regarding 28 Thomas Street in Mitcham, where last year councillors might remember that council was had the recommendation to have the demolition of the home and to have 2 double-storey dwellings built in place. Councillors might also remember that we had 33 objectors to that particular proposal, and in the end Councillor Stennett and I were able to have, what's the word I'm looking for, passed the deletion of the upper stories of both of the dwellings on this site. This has now come up again to council, and what they have done is actually proposed a single-storey dwelling instead, with at the very back, to have a double storey there, but facing the street is to have what is in keeping with the rest of the street, a single-storey dwelling. This was advertised, a total of 6 objections were received, and the objections were mainly around heritage and amenity impacts. I chaired the forum on the 19th of July, at which we did explore some issues. There was some consensus made, however no overall resolution was reached between the parties, and I've decided to call it in. Councillors, this is within the heritage precinct in Mitcham, and the Springfield ward only has 2 such heritage precincts, which is Spencer Street in Nunawading and Thomas Street in Mitcham. It's, and as councillors would know, over the last few decades, a significant number of heritage properties have been lost through demolition and unsympathetic redevelopment and extensions. So therefore, we are looking to have council look at this, and this is why I've put the recommendation to change the orientation of the look of the facade of the building facing the street from vertical, which absolutely does not suit the rest of the street. This is a heritage listed street. It has got particular values for people who live in the street and those around the street. And what I believe is that the vertical look of the building is something that came up in our consultation forum as being very significant for the people of Thomas Street. That is one of the major issues of this, that it's a very contemporary look, as it's in the paperwork, it's a very contemporary look, and this really does not fit within the streetscape. And other buildings around have done a lot more to go towards being sympathetic to what the original buildings are. The Thomas Street precinct is of aesthetic and historical significance of the city, as it presents a streetscape of generally late Edwardian and particularly immediate post-World War I era, as expressed by single-storey detached Californian bungalow-style housing. The street is of particular significance as it contains similar setbacks, materials, forms and levels of detail, giving the streetscape a consistent and unified appearance. And this particular precinct is of historical significance as it represents the transition period in which the Mitcham area developed from a rural township to a more suburban township after the electrification of the train line and expansion of the civic centre. The site is on the westerly side of Thomas Street, not far from here, and generally on the west there's some issues about what is contributory and not contributory, and the buildings, but the whole street has been classified under the heritage listing. Some of the west side of the street is more in the 40s and 50s, whereas others are more in the from 1980 to the 30s. So, councillors, the reason for this, as I've mentioned, namely, is to construct a new dwelling which is part single-storey facing the street with a double-storey element to the back. Council officers have engaged the heritage officer, who has indicated that that vertical are a satisfactory solution. However, my personal opinion
Councillor
that it is not.
Stennett.
So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I'd like to echo Councillor Cutt's words here. This goes back a few years. I recall just prior to the last council election, I chaired a planning consultation forum on 28 Thomas Street, and that was the decision that council made after the council election, where Councillor Cutts and I put forward an alternative recommendation, which was accepted by council and wasn't challenged at the time at VCAT by the applicant, which was to have instead of 2 double-storey dwellings, 2 single-storey dwellings. So now we're back again with this new application, and although we slightly changed the one at the back has a double-storey look, it is important the one at the front remains single-storey. It is also important, I think the applicant, I remember going back when they were looking at Thomas Street, this application, it was clear that, and I think part of it because they lived on the street, they did want to fit in with what was then called the Thomas Street feel of the street, and they were making some efforts to do that, but we felt at the time 2 doubles was too much, and I recall even debating whether it was reasonable to have 2 singles or whether we should allow 1 single and 1 double. I was 50-50 on it at the time, but this application I think is quite an acceptable change to the street. It's in terms of the character area and the fact it's a heritage overlay street. Even though this is it's not a contributory property, it is sitting within other contributory properties. It does sit within a heritage overlay, and so the response has to be sympathetic to the look and feel of the other houses on the street. The major things I see in terms of this application fitting in with the rest of the street in terms of setbacks, in terms of the style of dwelling, the form and the massing and the type of roof, the gable roof that fits in with Thomas Street. There are some local concerns the residents on the street have expressed to us as ward councillors, particularly about the front facade, and that's partly what this recommendation is. Fairly minor in a sense, but to the people who live on the street, it is quite important. It's meant to be a contemporary example, but maybe the front facade here is a bit too contemporary. So sort of bring that back a little bit in terms of what the rest of the street looks and feels like. But overall, I think it's a reasonably acceptable outcome.
Seek a speaker against the motion.
Yes,
Councillor Barker.
Mayor, this recommendation that's been put up by Councillor Cutts and Stennett is to affect. I don't have any issue with the front fence, and I note that officers in the conditions for the application have directed that the front fence be changed to a vertical, to a timber fence that's consistent with the rest of it. But I'd remind all councillors that we're not architects or exterior designers or specialists at this. And I'm disappointed that councillors feel a need to put forward a motion that's inconsistent with the Heritage Consultants report. We've paid a lot of ratepayers' money to engage experts like a heritage consultant who has said that this building is consistent with that. And I think, if we're going to hire experts, then we probably should listen to them rather than just spending the ratepayers' money. I'd like to refer you, Mayor, to the building next door, which is it's a very attractive Mission Brown single-storey building. And there's a lot of Mission Brown buildings. I'm just sort of suggesting to you, Mayor, that this is an architecturally superior building. It has got a wonderful tree retention in the front, and that natural wood facade, or the vertical timber battens, I think is something that we should welcome in our city. Because too often, and you've heard me speaking about the mirrored concrete facades that we have, or some of the other things, I actually think this applicant should be commended, Mr Mayor, and the officer's original recommendation should be supported, because the site coverage is actually low, the retention of valuable trees is high, and to change the battening of it, this is to suggest that councillors, we're the responsible authority. We're not design consultants. To change that vertical battening to parallel will make it look like a stack of timber. It's been done for a reason. The reason why battening's vertical is so water and dirt doesn't fall on it. So, I don't know that by changing this, whether we wouldn't interfere with the engineering of the building, Mr Mayor, the durability of the exterior. I've seen this work very well. I note on Easy Glide Doors in Nunawading, they've got this. It's quite contemporary and it's very natural. And we should be congratulating applicants that come to us with something that's natural. And one only needs to look at how the building articulates to the street in terms of the outline and the roof pitching. It is very consistent with the neighbourhood character. Now, you know, to suggest that this building or this landholder, that, you know, we should have some right to determine in detail exactly what they put on their building, it wasn't a building that was to be retained. And I've got to tell you, councillors, the Mission Brown unit next door is probably not going to have any heritage value at all at some point when it is ultimately replaced. So look, I'm sympathetic to the councillors that have listened to the staff. This is an architectural theme that's happening. I think the response has been very sensitive to the streetscape in terms of the second story is well set back, the trees. It looked lovely. I've got to say, Mr Mayor, I wish there were more applicants like this in our great city, and I'd urge all councillors to vote against this recommendation. Thank you, ma'am.
Are there any speakers in favour of the motion? Any speakers? Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, look, I'll speak in favour of the motion. I wasn't going to speak, but I think it's important to delineate between expert advice and what the community might want. And I come down on the side of what the community might want with such an application. I've got full confidence in our ward councillors who obviously have thought through this to a great extent and are really trying to come to a solution that will be in the best interests of their community and the community in general. So I don't think we should be overly concerned about suggesting an alternative that may be contrary to expert advice. So I'd just make that point because I think it's important to understand that councillors' first responsibility is to their community, and I think that should outweigh any other advice. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Any further speakers? As there has been a speaker against the motion, I will call upon Councillor Cutts for the right of reply.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Barker and Councillor Bennett. It just shows that we have a democracy here, and I think that's a very good thing. We don't all think the same, so it's a very good thing. I would like to address some issues that Councillor Barker has brought up about the Mission Brown house next door, and that was actually built about 50 years ago before the heritage overlay was brought onto the area in 2004-05, so that's why that particular construction is there. Now we have the heritage overlay in place. It's to prevent further buildings being inconsistent like that. Yes, we are not architects or designers, that is true, and but the thing is that we are listening to our community. When I chaired the forum, the main thing that people were concerned about was this big obtrusive frontage which has got nothing to do or relate to the rest of the street. That is why I've put this motion forward. So councillors, I ask you to consider this, and I would like you to please think about all of these reasons. Yes, it is a good outcome having a single story facing the street as opposed to last year when there were two double stories. This is a much better outcome for the street. However, there are other things as well with this which are very good as well. But the most important thing here is that the street, when I was having that forum, people were very, very concerned about the look of that building. And so, councillors, I'm asking you to please to support my recommendation here. Thank you.
Going to put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Division's been called. Those in favour? Councillor Ellis, Councillor Liu, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Carr, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Masood. Against? Councillor Munro, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Barker. Declare the motion carried. 9.1.3, 152 Dorking Road and 65 Tyford Street, Box Hill North. I seek a mover.
So moved, Mayor.
Councillor Liu moved. I seek a seconder. Okay, given that there's no seconder, the
Happy to second.
Councillor Ellis seconded. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular motion looks at a permit which allows the use and development of a childcare centre to extend hours of operation and increase the maximum number of children and associated reduction in car parking requirements. Now, councillors, as you know, generally I am pro car parking ratios, but given this particular application for the childcare centre to extend the hours operation by half an hour, to 6:30. Currently they're operating until 6 o'clock, and also increase the number of children from 50 to 55, requires an extra parking as per our parking scheme. However, given this particular location with car parking nearby, as well as the fact that, you know, it's a slight increase to what they're providing, so up to 55 students. The traffic engineer's report had specified that it would be very unlikely that it would have any significant impact to the particular area. I think to refuse this particular application based on one car park reduction, look, I don't think it's a good approach. In that, if it does get appealed, for example, I'm not sure that council has much weight in that particular argument. I would also like to note that there was actually no objections to this particular application, and it was called in by Councillor Barker. Finally, I would like to note that apart from that, everything else complies with this extension of the current permit, and that I also foreshadow Councillor Barker's motion, upcoming motion, which will look at some of that traffic mitigation moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor. I simply wanted this debated in the chamber. Thank you.
I seek a speaker against the motion.
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, make no mistake, I stand with the working families of Box Hill and Box Hill North. There's a lot to like about this application. An increase in the hours to 6:30 and to provide childcare on a Saturday, which is so important for the really valued people that live in our area and work as police officers, doctors, nurses, and on call in the health industry, in hospitality. So I absolutely feel for that, Mr. Mayor. However, we have a parking overlay for a reason, and consistently and every week people express a frustration to me that they cannot get around our city. In fact, Mayor, I had an accident in my own vehicle where one of my residents impacted my vehicle. That's always tough when you're the elected representative and someone runs into your car. You've got to be very polite about these things. But the issue is, Mr. Mayor, we've got a very successful little shops around the corner. This is the 270 bus route, which is a really valuable, it's a lifeline for a lot of people to get to Box Hill and around Blackburn and the back streets of Box Hill North and Blackburn North. But what's happening is because there are no parking restrictions on the eastern side of the street, all of the staff, where are they parking? They're parking on the road. They're parking on Dorking Road. So we've got parking cars on one side, and what do the residents do? Well, the residents are parking on that side as well because, yep, you guessed it, we've enabled, multiple units to be erected. And so there's parking on both sides, and then we have a bus coming down there, Mayor. And as the report says, This is close to Woodhouse Grove Kindergarten, 150 metres from the Kerrymuir Primary School, and Dorking Road traffic must have increased 400% in the last number of years because the Kerrymuir Primary School is, of course, taking all the overflow from the children who are living in these towers in Box Hill. Now, I can't go back to my community, look them in the eye and say, oh yeah, I signed off a waiver of a parking application. So many of the other childcare centres that other councillors here have knocked back have fully complied with all of the parking requirements. Why shouldn't this one? It's not a commercial zone. It's a childcare centre in a residential area. Knock it back, councillors. It's killing our streets. It's driving my residents crazy. Please refuse it.
Any speakers in favour of the motion? Any speakers against in favour?
Yes.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I support this for a couple of reasons. One, that there is a notice of motion that will be discussed after this particular item on the agenda. And if I can flag, I'm supportive of that particular notice of motion. Because I think it encapsulates the community consultation as far as parking considerations are concerned in this particular area. So I'm fully supportive of the community being involved in the outcome of this particular application for a permit. The second thing was that, as Councillor Liu said, there were no objections to this application when it was advertised. We give residents and objectors a chance to issue an objection, and they haven't. Now that seems to me to indicate that either there's apathy or that the residents and those people affected are not overly concerned. So, councillors, I would support this particular application being approved and supported, but with the rider that the notice of motion I think also should be supported so that the community can be consulted about potential parking issues in the area. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Carr.
I'm actually speaking along the same lines as Councillor Bennett. I'm supporting this motion for two reasons. One, because I don't think we have a leg to stand on if it went to VCAT. I honestly think VCAT would pretty much laugh us out of the room. And in that sense, I'm not willing to spend ratepayers' money fighting a losing battle in VCAT. Now, that's a bit negative, I know, but that's the way it is. The second reason that I'm supporting this motion is due to the very motion that Councillor Barker is proposing to put up after this, if this is successful. Now, perhaps if that motion wasn't there, I would be voting against this, because I understand Councillor Barker's arguments as well. Now, the thing is that because we know about this motion that will come up if this is successful. If it's not, we've got nothing to worry about. But if it is successful, then we will then be facing the motion. And I'm, along with Councillor Bennett, I will be supporting the motion that will come up after this, because I think that is a jolly good idea. And I think it's really good, but it's a bit of a catch-22. I mean, if that wasn't there, I would be more than likely voting against this. So anyway, at the moment, I'm in support.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Councillor Munro.
Mr Mayor, councillors, sometimes with existing facilities and often the case with strip shopping centres where there's no capacity to put in extra parking, but the analysis shows that the changes proposed and the surrounding environment can handle it, often come before us. And we have to sometimes make a balance in terms of renewal and continual development. What's being proposed here is some increase in numbers and also some hours for an existing facility. There isn't the ability, reasonable ability to put the extra parking space in. So, councillor, sometimes we have to make the pragmatic, yes, we don't want to be on a slippery slope in terms of giving too many dispensations, but sometimes it is appropriate, and I think this is one of the cases, and I'd urge councillors to support the motion.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Councillor Masood.
I'll just keep it quick. It is only an increase on an existing permit where they already function as a childcare centre. It's actually quite small for childcare centres. Nowadays they're often talking about they need to be 100, 120 really. My guess is it may well be used by a lot of local people. I do also think that the availability of childcare on a Saturday is useful for the community. It's not much of an increase. I do think it can be accommodated, and I will also foreshadow the support for the review of parking once it is done. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any further speakers in favour of the motion? There being no further speakers, I'll go to Councillor Liu for right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing to add, councillors certainly have the ability to put in a refusal motion if they felt very strongly about this. I suspect that all the councillors around this table probably understand and realise just in terms of the limitations of adding that extra car park spot, as well as the validity as well as the strength of the argument for this particular application if we were to refuse it. There's certainly questions around the strength of the argument. So I'll leave it at that, and I thank my fellow councillors for listening to the debate and adding to it. Thank you.
Put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried.
Division.
Division has been called. Those in favour? Councillor Munro, Councillor Masood, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Carr, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Liu, Councillor Ellis against. Councillor Barker. Declare the motion carried. Next item on the agenda is 6.1, Notice of Motion, number 114, Councillor Barker.
Thanks very much, Mayor. This is a notice of motion regarding the investigation and, if warranted, the installation of parking restrictions.
Yep, I'm going to pause you there, and I'm going to ask, that's just a description of the motion. I take it you're moving it. I'll now call for a seconder for the motion.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Liu seconded. Councillor Barker, your moving speech. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor. And one of the great frustrations I have as a councillor is the supposed separation between planning matters and parking, because this is very sensitive to our community. As I've mentioned earlier, it's just the ability to get around our streets, Mr. Mayor. I've heard people call it the suburban wave. This is a really busy feeder road, Dorking Road, and what's happening is because the staff at the childcare centre are parking out the front of the building instead of the adjacent side streets, which would be a lot better to do. Now, it's not up to me to turn up and knock on the door and tell the staff to park in other streets. But, you know, I was happy to have supported the original motion, but officers tell me, oh no, you can't have any parking restrictions out the front of this childcare centre. Now, the only people that would want to park here is the childcare centre, because next to it is a bus stop. Next to it is basically the corner of the next street up. So, and this is again comes down to the frustration that a lot of our residents are having with the planning scheme. Why wasn't I consulted? And it was mentioned before, oh, there weren't any objectors. Well, the reason there weren't any objectors is because next door is an empty former service station site. The people on the other side probably spend half the year living overseas and half the year living here. And council officers say, well, you know, under the Act, we only actually have to advise the immediately affected properties, which would be the empty service station site and the house next door where they're away, or one of the houses nearby where where they're away a lot. So this is quite simply about instructing the officers to do a proper investigation into it and to consult with the community, because it's not just the immediately affected homes, but it's also the traffic. You know, the 3,000 or 4,000 cars a day that go there, and kids on bikes that are trying to get to school that are, you know, finding it difficult to cross the road because the sight lines are blocked because people park on Dorking Road. So this is to inspect and to trigger an investigation into the traffic movements, and if warranted, then commence the process to investigate installing 1 hour parking restrictions, 8 till 6, Monday to Friday. That will enable mums and dads, if the parking on site is full, to park, get out, drop their kids at the childcare centre and go. But it basically stops the staff parking there, so they can go and park in any of the other streets like my street or the others, which I'm happy to do. I just don't want them on these roads because, as I say, it's causing accidents. I would encourage all councillors to support it.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. I do understand some of the challenges that we face, not only with this particular application, but with many applications across the municipality, around that notion of, you know, the traffic within the proximity of the subject site. And I guess one of the restraints that we have as part of the planning process is that you know, we look at the merits of each application, and that also includes, you know, traffic and parking sort of within the subject site. But sort of the surrounding considerations are generally not assessed. So I certainly support this motion that looks at the traffic movements as well, with this particular proposed increase on the childcare centre service hours and the provision of up to 55 children there. And I think Councillor Barker raises a very interesting point as well, and an important point about community consultation. So I'm certainly supportive of that, and I urge my fellow councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion?
Mr. Mayor, not speaking, I didn't want to raise a point of order, but I just had I wondered if I could seek your indulgence to ask the General Manager of City Development to respond to the, I think, quite serious allegations that we've heard tonight by Councillor Barker that only the neighbouring 2 immediate adjacent properties were advertised. There was no other advertising, no other public notice. Can we understand whether that was in fact accurate, or whether it's other forms of public notice and other consultation by mail?
Okay, I'll take that as a question about the motion. I'll refer it to the acting CEO.
Through the Mayor, if I can just clarify, you're referring to the advertising of the planning permit amendment? My understanding is that generally that would have included the immediately abutting properties and those properties that are adjacent to the site, so across the road as well. And then I assume notices, yellow notices up on the site as well for 2 weeks. Thank you.
I seek a speaker against the motion. I seek a speaker in favour of the motion. There's no speakers either for or against. I'm going to put the motion straight to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 9.1.4, Whitehorse Community Forum regarding North East Link.
Mayor, move an alternate.
An alternate by Councillor Barker. I'll ask for the alternate to be placed on the screen, and then ask Councillor Barker for a brief summary of the alternate.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Mayor, this is to add point 5, which is to relocate Yarra Valley Water's proposed sewage treatment plant into other areas of the North East Link, such as the Doncaster Park and Ride, and not in valued Whitehorse parklands.
Is there a seconder for the alternate?
Seconded, Mayor.
Councillor Liu seconded. Councillor Barker, your moving speech.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor. And I've got to say, I was delighted to join so many of our residents at the North East Link Community Forum. And talking to people over the last couple of months, it is our parks, our open spaces, those green areas where people walk their dogs, play with their kids, just relax, look at birds. Our parks are really valuable to the people in Whitehorse, Mr Mayor. And we understand that the North East Link is going to have a significant impact on our parks. And we also understand that the North East Link is going to involve the necessary destruction of the Doncaster Park and Ride, in that that will be destroyed and rebuilt as part of the road, and so will the Park and Ride. Well, that's the information that we have from the North East Link Authority, Mr Mayor. But at the moment, and I know we've spoken about it in some detail, Yarra Valley Water's proposed sewage treatment plant would be going into Erin Park, which is going to, we will lose about 22 metres of that park with the widening of the Eastern Freeway. And now that this project has bipartisan support, we know the advocacy that we're going to put to state government and the North East Link Authority. So the last thing we need, Mr Mayor, after all of our residents have genuinely told us they want to minimise the amount of parkland loss, is to lose 20 metres of Erin Park to the North East Link Authority, and then lose another 2,500 to 3,000 square metres to a sewage treatment plant. So this is quite simply, we fully adopt the officer recommendation, but add point 5, which is to relocate the sewage treatment plant to other areas of the North East Link that aren't parkland, Mr Mayor, because that's what our residents have told us. And I know all of the councillors here have listened to their residents on that, and we're talking about the increased traffic on the adjacent roads, absolutely, but this is something else that we need to show our community that we stand with them and we will protect the parkland that we can protect. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Luke.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I support this motion, in particular looking at opportunities, if possible, to look at relocating the proposed recycled water plant. Our residents in Whitehorse have been very vocal and they've made their concerns known regarding this particular proposed recycled water plant at Erin Park, which is part of Whitehorse land. Now, with the North East Link preliminary designs, it does show that it will eat into quite a bit of our open space, which is at the moment, it's vital for our area, in particular Elgar Ward, where we're seeing unprecedented development and growth. And open space and green space is more important than ever. So I think, councillors, if we could look at any possibilities or any opportunities to look at, preserving the open space and whether or not Yarra Valley Water can look at relocating the proposed plant at Erin Park, I certainly think that we should explore it. And as representatives of the Elgar Ward and the Greater Whitehorse, I think it's our responsibility to explore any avenue possible. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment, and it just follows off Councillor Liu's comments about exploring. I think the motion is better if the additional point is added, that it be something about exploring the relocation rather than dictating, because it's actually not a East Link. It's a Melbourne Water project, not a East Link project, but I appreciate there may be some opportunity. So I think for me that sits more comfortably to explore the possibility to relocate if the mover and seconder would accept that amendment.
I'm going to ask the mover and seconder before I seek a seconder. Do you accept that suggestion?
No, Mayor, because that's
Okay,
that's the
that's
mealy
all.
mouth
Mayor, I'm
politics
happy
of
to-
not having any spine in terms of
Councillor
standing
Barker,
up to those organised.
Councillor Barker, I've got your point. I will now ask for a seconder for the amendment.
What is the amendment?
So the amendment as moved by Councillor Munro.
Point of order, Mayor.
Hang on. All right, I'll go to the point of order. Councillor Barker, what is the nature of your point
So
of order?
we've got a mover and a seconder to this, Mayor. Don't we need to vote on this first?
Councillor Councillor Barker, I'm handling the amendment, and if the amendment is moved and seconded, it becomes part of the motion. If it fails, then your original motion stands. So I'm going to first go to Councillor Munro just to clarify again the wording of 5.
To explore the relocation of the, and then the rest is the same.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to second, Mayor.
So Councillor Munro moved an amendment. Councillor Stennett seconded the amendment. So Councillor Munro, moving speech.
Councillors, it's a relative minor point, but it really is just the nuance that the the North East Link project is not directly connected to the Melbourne Water sewage treatment plant, and Yarra Valley Water, is it? Yarra Valley Water sewage treatment plant, but it may provide an opportunity, given the works, that within that envelope of development there is a possibility. So we certainly should make that encouragement to have that looked at. But councillors, I don't see it as our role to dictate that it be relocated, and that's the nuance I'm seeking. And given Councillor Barker's point of order, I don't think it's wishy-washy, mealy-mouth. I think it's actually a practical thing that this council can do in terms of taking our concerns to the North East Link Authority and project and express it in those terms. I'd ask you to support the amendment.
Councillor Stannett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, at first, when the amendment was brought up, number 5, I looked at it and it just seemed a bit out of place, and I think Councillor Munro sort of hit on the nail on the head, that really this is not a NELA project, but it's a Melbourne, Yarra Valley Water project or whatever. However, I do recognise that it's an issue for our community, and Councillor Barker is quite correct to raise it, and it's an issue that we should be advocating for, and I believe we have been. And it was something that was brought up by people at the forum in relation to the North East Link and generally in terms of open space, and I think that was where I see it covered in terms of perhaps open space, but it really could have been a separate motion entirely. But I'm happy to go with something here to sort of allow this motion to go through. But I do think it's, in the way that's worded, it is too prescriptive. But we still need to, I think, not acknowledge that it's an issue and say that we're advocating on behalf of our residents. But I just think it is better worded the way that Councillor Munro has proposed.
So, Speaker against the amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillors, this motion is about our advocacy to the state government. It's about our advocacy. Now, we're elected by the people of Whitehorse to represent their interests. They've told us clearly that they want us to advocate that the sewage treatment plant not be in their parkland. Now, the notion, the fantasy and the fiction that this is not related, that Yarra Valley Water's sewage treatment plant isn't related to the North East Link, is a complete fiction, Mr. Mayor. We've heard their general managers say that when you widen a road this much, we are directly impacting sewerage mains, water mains, all the rest of that sort of stuff. And they've told us directly, if you were listening, councillors, that they need to work with and deconflict all of those services that are going to be impacted. And power will be impacted, and telecommunications will be impacted. When you build a road this big, these things are impacted. So it is directly related. The sewage treatment plant is directly related to this road because they're effectively arguing over the same piece of real estate. Now, that's the fact of it, councillors. And to come back to the fair income fact, it is the spineless, mealy-mouth politics of not knowing who you stand for. Councillors, we stand for and with the people of Whitehorse. Not with a utility that owes them nothing and wants to put a sewage treatment plant in their park. Reject this motion, councillors.
Seek a speaker in favour of the amendment. Seek a speaker against the amendment.
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Bennett.
I agree with Councillor Barker. I think it's mealy-mouthed in the extreme to water down point 5. we are advocating to the state government opposition and NILA about outcomes for the Whitehorse community. We all agree, I'm sure, that we don't want a sewerage plant in our Whitehorse parklands. So we might be accused of, the NIMBY principle, but we don't want the sewerage plant in Whitehorse. So let's say that. Rather than explore, let's say we don't want it. So that's why I'm speaking against that amendment, because to me that will be just dismissed out of hand. As soon as they see that word, explore, it will just be wiped completely. If we don't want the sewerage plant to take up valuable Whitehorse parklands, then say so. Thank you.
I seek a speaker in favour of the amendment. I seek a speaker against the amendment. There being no speakers, further speakers, there is no right of reply. I'm going to put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Against? The amendment is lost. We'll go back to the substantive. I seek a speaker against the motion. Seek a speaker in favour of the motion. Given there's no speakers, I don't think there was a speaker for or against. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against?
Division.
Motion is carried. Division has been called. Those in favour? Councillor Stennett, Councillor Cutts, Councillor Davenport, Councillor Carr, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Barker, Councillor Liu, Councillor Ellis. Against? Councillor Munro and Councillor Masood. I declare the motion carried. 9.1.5 Whitehorse Community Road Safety Strategy. I seek a mover.
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Bennett moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Masood seconded. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, 9.1.5, the road safety strategy. The motion is to note this report. So this report gives a progress update on actions delivered during the 2017 calendar year. So we've spoken a number of things tonight about how important road safety is if we get fellow residents having an accident with us, or we just know driving on the roads that accidents can happen at a moment's notice, and how important road safety is for all of us. The facts are, councillors, in 2017 3 people died and 84 were seriously injured within the city of Whitehorse. They're the tragic facts. And it's probably not news to everyone that that young people, that people aged 18 to 25, represent the highest represented age group of 19% of all injury crashes within the municipality. And that the road users, especially pedestrians, make up 59% of deaths and 19% of all serious injuries. And it's probably not surprising also that rear-end crashes are the most common type of crashes involving injury, followed by right-hand turns into oncoming vehicles. Other common crashes are side impacts at intersections and crashes involving pedestrians. So I think there's nothing new about that, but those statistics are what this report is all about. So what are we doing to improve road safety in Whitehorse? So the report details a wide range of road safety programs that seek to educate and mitigate these high-risk situations. So if you've read the report, there's many programs, but they include school-based programs, speed observation trailers, we've all seen those throughout the municipality, and pedestrian and cycling safety programs with young people as well as older people. So if you've read the attachment, you'll see what the progress update is on all those programs. So that's what the report is all about. I noted, somewhere I was reading this recently, that the Commonwealth has recently announced a road safety governance review that was a recommendation of the independent inquiry into the National Road Safety Strategy. So this is at all levels of government, and that particular initiative is coming from the Commonwealth. The inquiry called for the need for improvements in road safety leadership, resourcing and technology, and that's something that our municipality follows as well. So the report aligns with the objective for us to play our role in reducing the trauma associated with road traffic accidents. So, Councillor, I move that this motion, that the report be noted. Thank you.
Councillor Masood.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it was really good to read that since 2003 we've had a 49% reduction in deaths and injuries on the Whitehorse roads, but it has tapered off, I guess, because we've made so many inroads, only a 4% reduction in the last 5 years. But I think it is if you look at the actual attachment for this report, there's 11 pages of action items that have been completed. So I commend officers for their effort, because we are moving in the right direction, and I think that's really important for our community. And I think it is a good time for everybody to think a little bit more, because road trauma is something we must all actively try to prevent and be responsible road users. And I acknowledge the headway we're making, but I also hope that our community, when they see this report, realise the importance of their full focus when they're using our roads, regardless of whether they're in a car, on a cycle or simply walking. So I think we should note this report proudly. We're heading in the right direction, but there's still more to be done, and to raise awareness of people. I think in the era of devices, and we all can be driving and seeing people using them, we have to try and alert people and say we can cut road trauma a lot more if we start to pay a lot more attention and focus properly. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no speakers, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.2.1, Tender Evaluation Report.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Masood moved. Councillor Cutt seconded. Councillor Masood.
We undertake an extensive annual bushland maintenance program, which is responsible for coordinating and implementing our I suppose, management of our remnant bushland areas, parklands, creek and river corridors. And we do engage the assistance of a number of contractors, and the reason we have to have more than one is sometimes with certain weather events we need several contractors to actually be able to attend to that event. And so it's important that we get a range of contractor services. In this report, there are 5 successful tenderers that have been recommended. Their works include remnant vegetation management and enhancement works, general site maintenance, weed control, revegetation, ecological burning and other environmental rehabilitation activities. Certainly every year, because I'm very familiar with Blackburn Lake Sanctuary, there is some controlled burning to try to minimise the lower growth so that we avoid, I suppose, risky situations. It's all about risk management. The term of the contract is 3 years, and there is an option to extend the contract with the estimated expenditure of $960,000 for 3 years, and with an extension it would be $1.6 million. It is costly, but we very much value these spaces. The successful tender submissions were considered to provide the best value for money, showed the greatest understanding of the specification requirements and standards, displayed highly competitive pricing. They had experience undertaking comparable works and had highly experienced staff. So I think the recommendations in this report clearly outline that we are looking to make sure we have contractors who can provide best practice in terms of bushland management. And so, as I said, there are 5 listed contractors: Envirotechniques, Hass and Gray Indigenous Horticulture, Indigenous Design, Environmental Services, Nature Links, Landscape Management and Practical Ecology. And I recommend this motion to my fellow councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Nasood, for your very comprehensive explanation of the tender evaluation. Look, I'd like to talk a little bit about Envirotechniques, as I've actually had a lot to deal with them over the last 3 years, and Karen and her team have done a sensational job at the Heatherdale Creek Parklands area, where I used to be chair before I got on council. I used to see them every day. Come hail or shine, they would be still working there. They usually work there about once a week. They also work at Antonio Park, Cootamundra Walk, Bellbird Dell, Wurundjeri Walk. So if they are, and they are, in that group of 5 which are recommended by council, and with the tender evaluation done, I have nothing but praise for them, and certainly commend this for councillors' recommendation. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? There's no speakers. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.3.1 Early Years Municipal Early Years Plan 2014-18 Implementation Report for 2018. I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Liu moved. A seconder.
Happy to move. A second, sir.
Councillor Stennett seconded. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this report is essentially an update on the implementation status of the Municipal Early Years Plan 2014 to 2018. Councillor Stennett and I had the pleasure of being part of the steering committee of this particular group. And the plan essentially looks at improving and as well as developing services and support for young children between the ages of 0 and 12, as well as their families and support network. So in terms of the key priority areas, we're looking at healthy, active and thriving children, secure, supported, engaged families, quality services for all children and families, safe, welcoming and inclusive community for all children and families. As you know, councillors, from 0 to 12, I mean, these are essentially the fundamental years for young children in terms of development, and I'm pleased to say that, you know, the group has looked at, you know, various initiatives to further enhance the plan that is currently existing. So I would like to list, you know, some of the key achievements in the past year, including the continuation of the parent information forums. And there are 4 that are conducted yearly, and it's in terms of, you know, topics, you know, it varies, and we've received a lot of, you know, good feedback and attendance numbers for all the forums. There's also a Flexi Buzz app which provides, you know, a myriad of, you know, updates and news around this early years space, and currently we have over 800 subscribers to that particular application. The Whitehorse Family Resource Guide, we've recently had a revamp of that, and so it is, the newly updated version is out at the moment, and it's been proved to be quite popular as well with families. Toy library and playgroup pamphlet, as many of you are aware, that's been very successful and popular, and we're continuing to update that and distribute the resources to families. There's also been work around our called groups, so in particular Chinese playgroups, and I know our maternal childcare health area has been looking into that, and as well as the early years services as well. particularly around that sort of healthy eating and outdoor play. Those have been some of the key themes. There's continued work also with some of our key partners through the Whitehorse Early Years Sector Network, and generally we hold 3 meetings a year, and the themes that we've looked at this year is around family violence and also the NDIS and the update to that. There's also been quite a bit of work around vulnerable families and including grandparents, which, as you know, are becoming, more involved in terms of looking after children in families as well. So promotional material has been altered to embrace guardians that are not parents, but also potentially other members of the extended family. And there's also continued participation in the neighbourhood project and around the activation of public spaces and also create family-friendly events. One other thing to note is in regards to the immunisation rates in Whitehorse, which is above state and regional averages and continues to be, just in terms of our immunisation rates, it is, steadily above those averages. I think there's still a number of points, highlights, but the report is there for you to have a look at, councillors and members of the public, and I'm happy to fully endorse this report. Thank you.
Councillor Stennett.
Thank you. Just firstly, I'd like to say what a great report. So this goes back 4 years. We're coming to the end of the 4-year plan, A City for All Children, that's what it was called. And so we're looking forward to making a new plan and linking that together potentially with the youth plan as well, reviewing those together. It's been recognised through extensive research that the early years of a child's life are crucial in laying foundations that contribute to a child's future development, health and wellbeing. Now, as a teacher myself and working with young people and currently working with primary school aged children, I can see that firsthand myself. This plan went through extensive consultation with lots of different parts of our community, developed into a plan with a number of priority areas that Councillor Liu has outlined, with action plans that were reviewed annually, that covered the whole age range between 0 and 12, calling the early years. And this plan directly relates to the improvement of health and wellbeing outcomes in our community for children and their families. So that's something that the council can say that we are directly contributing to through the implementation of this plan. I'd also like to highlight a couple of things in the report, in particular the overwhelming success of the parent information forums. I've been to a couple myself. At one I went and I was lucky to get in myself. I was standing room only in the Willis room, and it was incredibly popular. And all of the forums have been, and we've got very positive feedback from those parent information forums in terms of the content and the usefulness of what's presented in those forums. I've been personally interested, involved since I was elected, in fact, in one particular aspect that's highlighted in the report, which is the Child Friendly Cities initiative. So something councillors would be aware, some of them in the room going back that far would be aware of my involvement in getting council to adopt the principles of the Child Friendly Cities, and we've done more work in that space. If you're not familiar with it, have a look, and it's quite interesting in terms of working with children, consulting with children on matters that affect them and implementing those into our plan.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speaker in favour of the motion? I'm going to put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.3.2 Municipal Youth Plan 2014-18 Implementation Plan. I'll read that again. Municipal Youth Plan 2014-18 Implementation Plan for 2018.
Happy to
seek a
move.
mover. Councillor Stennett. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Liu. Councillor Stennett, moving speech, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So again, this is another plan that goes back the last 4 years. So it's in its last year, and looking forward to revise this plan and potentially looking at revising it in conjunction with the early years plan. So I look forward to that. So this was called a City for All Young People. It was a strategic-wide plan and recognised the importance of adolescence and early years. It's a vital period of development and transition for young people, and also recognise the role of the community in ensuring young people make a happy and a safe transition into adulthood in a community that supports and respects them. In the report it says that many young people, often referred to as marginalised within the communities, which is often not the case. So again, a fairly similar structure to the early years plan. There was extensive consultation and a planning process that was employed in the development of the plan, and there were a number of priority areas and respective action plans, and those action plans and priority areas form the basis of annual action plans that have and will be developed within council and with partner organisations and other key stakeholders and their families. I'd just like to highlight the importance of the work of the Whitehorse Youth Representation Committee in implementing this plan as well, and their work within the community. Obviously, council has started this project some 15 years ago or longer. I think it was 2002. I think the Whitehorse Youth Representation Committee started. So it's well established, and every year there are a number of young people that volunteer their time, and I never seek to be amazed with the effort that they go to in running events and being leaders and role models for their peers, working with young people within schools and universities and TAFEs. One of the things that they do every year is the Municipal Youth Forum. The last 3 years, it's, that committee has coordinated and facilitated that youth forum hosted at the Box Hill Town Hall, which has covered a diverse range of youth issues, and incredibly important for the young people that attend and the partner organisations that attend as well, to get some key learnings from that forum. So I commend the report. Thank you to everyone who was involved in the implementation of the report, and note that this is the final year of the youth plan, and look forward to the next iteration of the youth plan and the early years plan.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Stennett had covered it really well. Council is continuing to work very closely with people, you know, the youth of the community, as well as partners as well. You know, there is a number of youth service intervention and outreach programs that are currently being implemented, as well as, you know, that Whitehorse Youth Issues Network as well, and with some of the major stakeholders and partners such as Carrington Health, Family Access Network and Eastern Health. So I do commend the report, and yeah, I hope my fellow councillors will support this wonderful report as well. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? There's no speakers either for or against. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 941, Annual Report 2017-18. I seek a mover.
Yeah, happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Stennett moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Ellis seconded. Councillor Stennett.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Council's annual report was presented to the Minister for Local Government in accordance with the Act in September. The annual report is to be presented to Council today in accordance with Section 134 of the Local Government Act. So the Local Government Act requires Council to prepare and approve an annual report, and that includes a number of things, including operations of the council, an audited performance statement, financial statements, and any other matters required by the regulations. So what it does is also give us an opportunity to highlight the achievements and the challenges of the community, and I note those challenges and achievements have been noted in the report in the Mayor's and CEO's statements at the front, and quite detailed report follows. So the major initiatives I'd like to highlight are the digital strategy that we're currently implementing, getting ahead with the Whitehorse Centre and the Nunawading Community Hub, which are two of the biggest projects on our books at the moment. It'll be fantastic when they're completed, and they're of course both in Springfield Ward, not being parochial of course, and the business improvement program plan, which has been very successful as well. And note the savings, the initiatives, the efficiency gains that have been noted in the report. Despite the challenge of rate capping, Whitehorse continues to have one of the lowest average rates in Melbourne. We are providing many high quality services. We're continuing to deliver those to our community. There are, in the report, it details quite strong financial statements. We are meeting the Victorian Auditor General's sustainability requirements. We are one of the most financially sustainable councils in Melbourne, and that wasn't always the case. When I was elected a little over 10 years ago, we were one of the worst financially sustainable councils in Melbourne, and that's turned around, not by any accident, but slow and steady progress has been made to turn what was an underlying deficit into a repeatable surplus, and those surpluses have contributed to major projects such as the Whitehorse Centre and the Nunawading Community Hub that would not be possible without those repeatable surpluses. So I commend the report, not only financial achievements, but also the achievements in terms of our annual plan and our 10-year vision statement, and commend that to Council. Thanks.
Councillor Ellis.
I think Councillor Stennett's covered it quite well. As it states here, the final audit reports on the financial statements and performance statements were received from the Auditor General on the 28th of August, and the annual report was submitted to the Minister for Local Government on Thursday the 27th of September. We followed all the consultation requirements, and we've certainly highlighted our achievements in the last 12 months, and we have stated our performance as a council, and in my very humble opinion, we're travelling well. And I urge our community to have a look at the annual report and just see what their council is doing. We've have a lot of achievements under our belt, and Councillor Stennett mentioned a couple of our major developments, but for every one of those there's a dozen or so other smaller ones that add to the fabric of our community and add to the lifestyle of our residents and our community, while we still maintain financial viability, even a rate capping environment. So I urge anyone listening to this to have a look at our annual report and see how well we're travelling. And I'm very happy to second this motion. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers for or against, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.2, proposed creation of a sewerage easement over council land, 47 Roachdale Drive, Burwood East. I seek a mover.
Happy to move.
Councillor Ellis moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Masood seconded. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Council is the registered proprietor of the property, which is also known as Donaldson Reserve. And on its western boundary, it abuts the Burwood Brickworks site. And they've applied to Council for a sewerage easement over a strip of council land. And the proposed easement will link that part with the Ely Road sewerage. So I suppose it is a necessary thing to occur. The land in question is 237 square metres, and there will be a payment towards council of $75,000 for that piece of land, and council isn't required to go to public notice or to hear submissions in respect of this, and it is to be recorded as a title for Yarra Valley Water instead of for the brickwork site, because that's the purpose of this piece of land that we are actually selling. And the proposed easement will have minimal impact on the use of Donaldson Reserve. So I urge my colleagues to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Masood.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, there's not much more to add. We all know the brickwork site is a huge site with massive development, and naturally it will need some sewerage infrastructure, and this actually is giving access from that property down to Ely Road, so it makes sense. We actually get a little bit of money in our pockets for it, and it is a reserve anyway, so you've still got it's still I think a gravel path anyway, so that won't really change. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no speakers for or against, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.3, intention to lease land at 10 to 12 Watt Street, Box Hill. I seek a mover.
So moved, Mayor.
Councillor Liu moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Barker seconded. Councillor Liu.
Councillors, this report looks at council's intention to lease land at 10 to 12 Watt Street, Box Hill, to Early Childhood Management Services, also abbreviated as ECMS, for a total lease term of 2 years in accordance with clauses 1B, 2 and 3 of the Retail Leases Act 2003, ministerial determination dated 13th of October 2014, with an annual rental of $9,000 plus GST, with a proposed commencement date of 1st of January 2019. Councillors, this particular site is licensed out to the ECMS, and they are a non-for-profit provider of early learning and childcare services. And the existing lease, so they've had the lease with us since 2011. So the existing lease, which is now in overholding, was granted to them in 2011 for 7 years, with a commencement date of 1st of July 2011, with an expiry date of 30th of June 2018. So childcare centres generally operate on a calendar year rather than a financial year. So accordingly, Council has written to ECMS advising that the existing lease will be placed in overholding from the 1st of July of this year to the end of the year, so the 31st of December. So this overholding provision will also enable the ECMS to continue their services without any disruption. Now, childcare services, councillors, generally are considered retail service under the Retail Leases Act 2003. But however, as ECMS are a non-for-profit organisation, they are exempt from the provisions, some of the provisions under the Retail Leases Act 2003, based on the ministerial determination, which I mentioned earlier, dated 13th of October 2014. So it also means that Council has a bit more flexibility in regards to what we could offer in terms of the lease terms. So with this in mind, some of the determination caps the rent also at $10,000 inclusive of GST per annum. And if the rent exceeds $10,000 per annum, during the life of the lease, then this particular provision cannot be applied. So council is looking to lease the land to ECMS for a 2-year period, providing more flexibility for council to undertake some further assessment and works around the particular site. So if this report is supported, then it will go to a public notice and it will be open to public submissions for a consideration and determination by 10th of December of this year. So I support this report. Certainly in terms of childcare services, they provide obviously a very important service to our community, and I support this report. Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. Very comprehensive from Councillor Lew. Really interesting background. That was a joint venture between the City of Box Hill, the ATO and the TAFE that set this up about 24 years ago. It's a really popular little childcare centre for people in our area because it's situated at the end of Watt Street there, which is obviously a dead end, so it's quite popular for people to go into our multi-level car park, travel to the city or do what they need to do in Box Hill and have their children there. And you see a lot of people walking there on their way to the station, drop their kids there, so it's a popular little space. You know, it is 24 years old now, and obviously council needs to do some thinking about the longer term future of the site and the building. So I recommend this to all councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no speakers for or against, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.4, intention to lease land at 96 to 106 Springvale Road, Nunawading. I seek a mover.
Yeah, happy to move.
Councillor Stennett, I seek a seconder.
Yes, happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Cutts. Councillor Stennett.
So, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just bear with me. So the report advises council of a proposed substation lease of a part of council-owned land known as the Nunawading Hub that we're all familiar with in Nunawading, and to authorise the statutory process in accordance with the Local Government Act. So that recommendation is to give notice of council's intentions to lease part of the land at Springvale Road, Nunawading, to United Energy Distribution for a lease term of 30 years with a rental of $1 if demanded. That's a pretty good deal, with a proposed commencement date of the 1st of January 2019. Authorise manager of property rates to undertake the procedures necessary to carry out its functions accordance with the Act, and appoints Council Special Committee to consider and hear any submissions at the meeting on the 3rd of December at 8 p.m. So the background to that in the report, the council-owned property is the site for the Nunawading Community Hub, which is due to commence construction fairly soon, and it notes the future electricity needs of the proposed hub necessitates the need for a new substation, which is to be located on the northern tidal boundary of the subject property abutting Esdale Street. And it's pretty procedural. We need to do it, and I urge the council to support it.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As councillors would know, the Nunawading Community Hub was formerly the building contract was given to the Melbourne-based commercial construction firm Island Brown Constructions, who will be starting to work at the site in November. We look forward to partnering with Island Brown Constructions to transform this site into the vibrant community hub and a place where people of all ages and backgrounds feel welcome and can come together to embrace new opportunities for learning, social interaction and getting active. And as a consequence of this, we need the substation to provide the energy for this. So that is why, councillors, we are looking at this particular proposal, and I seek your assistance with voting this forward. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? No further speakers for or against. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.5, tender evaluation parking meter replacement. I seek a mover. (9.4.5).
Happy
So
to
moved.
Okay, Councillor Munro moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Ellis seconded. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just turning back the page because I was getting excited for the one about live streaming. So 9.4.5, councillors, you have the report before you, and so this is about the tender for the parking meter replacement program, and what's being called for is Australian Revenue and Parking Control. It's a very long-winded title there. The report proposes to place the formal order with APARC and receive the 4G certification for its network, and authorise Chief Executive Officer to execute the necessary contract documents under this arrangement, and consider charging the Saturday parking tariff in Council's off-street car parks from $7.50 per day to $2.70. I commend the report to councillors and seek that you accept the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The council, this was actually advertised in The Age on Saturday the 26th of April this year. So we're looking at 6 months ago. And we received 6 tenders from the following companies that are listed in here. And APARC, A-P-A-R-C, was actually the successful one. And there's details of the assessments here in the agenda if anybody wishes to look at it. And we have now, this motion will be authorising the Chief Executive Officer to execute all the necessary contract documents for this arrangement. So I think it's fairly straightforward, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Liu.
Just a quick one, Mayor. Look, I do commend this report. When I came on council, up until now, I've received numerous feedback from our residents, community, visitors to Whitehorse regarding our parking meters. This is certainly a very hot topic, and it's good to see that we'll be getting more smart technology and to make it more convenient for people that not only live in the area but also visiting the area. I'd also like to make a mention particularly regarding Council's off-street parking charge consideration. Now, $7.50 per day is actually the cheapest, I think, in Box Hill, in particular around the CBD area, and sort of further considerations to reduce that to $2.70, I think, would certainly provide some relief for people that live and visit Box Hill, and I certainly commend that. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to add something that isn't in the report, and that was something that councillors were informed of this evening, that we have just heard that the successful tenderer is compliant with the Responsible Recycling R2 standard for electronic recyclers, which actually means that they are now offering to recycle all the old machines, which means that they will take them back, they will replace the old machines with the new ones, recycle the old ones, take out the motherboard, the wiring, all the components out and sort them out and recycle what they can, and the remaining metal will be melted down for recycling, which is a much better alternative than these parking meters going to landfill or council trying to recycle them themselves. So this is a financial benefit to council to do this. Works out to be much cheaper than council hiring a truck to go and pick up all these old parking meters and sort them all out and recycle. So that's a good news for the community. The cost of recycling to council is $85 per unit. So that does, I know that sounds a lot per unit, but it does work out to be a much better financial option for council. So it's a good news story. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? So there's been no speakers against the motion. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.6, dog off-lead review. I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Carr. Seek a seconder.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Barker. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, as you are well aware, I've been a proud and passionate member of the Domestic Animal Management Advisory Committee since its inception. During this time, some community members have expressed their concern around the number of off-lead dog parks in the city of Whitehorse. These were last reviewed in 2012, and due to the increase in population since that time and the subsequent increase in the number of dogs, it was felt the pressure on our 19 off-lead parks was becoming an issue. As a result, the Domestic Animal Management Committee decided to conduct a review of off-lead parks in the city of Whitehorse. As part of this review, several members of the DAMP committee went on a short bus trip to visit potential off-lead parks. It was the best thing I think the committee could have done. It was really a beneficial little tour. We initially agreed on 5 possible sites. However, this was reduced to 4 when it was discovered the greater part of Frank Sedgman Reserve was already an off-lead park in the jurisdiction of Manningham. The small section in Whitehorse didn't really make a lot of difference. The 4 sites that were left were Elgar Park, Erin Park, Billabong Reserve and Tyrrell Park. Of these 4, only 1 has not been recommended in this report. This was Tyrrell Park in Vermont South. I was personally disappointed with this result, as I believe there is an acute shortage of off-lead parks on the south side of Burwood Highway. In fact, we don't have, at this stage, we don't have any from Springvale Road to the creek. We have no off-lead dog parks at all. So I'm hoping at least if this report gets up, we will at least have Billabong Park. However, on Tyrrell Park, the residents have voted, and I do respect their decision. Also of a personal disappointment, and I find this quite astonishing really, was the overall number of responses received from nearby residents of both Billabong Reserve and Tyrrell Park. Out of the collective total of 1,239 notices distributed, so 1,239 notices were sent out by the City of Whitehorse to surrounding residents of these 2 parks, only 76 responses were received. I'm sorry, residents out there, I find that very, very sad. Anyway, even so, some good did come out of those responses, and they did raise a number of issues. So the lack of fencing, proximity to playgrounds and schools, the lack of bins at the location, and this is one issue I totally agree with and have been advocating for many years. And a particular concern to me, it sounds like a whinge, doesn't it? Of particular concern to me is the ongoing issue of the lack of control from owners walking their dogs off lead. I find it astounding that we are still getting this feedback from residents. It's a no-brainer that if you cannot control your dog for whatever reason, then you keep it on lead. This is part of being a responsible dog owner. Dogs should only be off lead if they return to their owner when called. Councillors, as a result of this survey, I am delighted to move this motion to add an extra 3 off-lead dog parks to Whitehorse, bringing the total number to 22. They are all in much-needed areas. Some are being used already, so now they are official. If adopted this evening, the new Order Number 7 stipulates when in public places, leads must be no longer than 1.5 metres in length, an owner must be no further than 25 metres from their dog. Dogs are not permitted within 2.5 metres of a playground, a permanent barbecue, picnic area or an organised public meeting, and the dog must immediately return to its owner when called. If this proposal is successful tonight, the additional 3 off-lead parks become official as from the 1st of November. Councillors, I seek your support because we do need more off-lead parks in Whitehorse. Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. This isn't a motion about dogs. Councillors, this isn't a motion about people. Because I'm a dog lover, and in my experience, it's been affirmed in my entire life, dogs enable people to come together. You know, you've probably heard me speak in this place before about loneliness, social and cultural isolation. Dogs help us overcome that. There is nothing quite like dogs playing together that cause people that would never usually speak to one another to smile at one another or to get to know the other dog's name. I mean, you often only know one by your dog's name, yours, Paddy's, you know. And I was up at Mont Albert Reserve on Friday night, Mr Mayor, and the Mont Albert Cricket Club hosted the Welcome to the Cricket Season drinks for the dog walkers at Mont Albert Reserve, which is one of our most popular off-lead dog parks. And there must have been about 50 people there, probably 60 dogs. Some people didn't come with dogs. They were all genders. They were all, you know, there was the gay, the straight, you name it. There were people from overseas, people that were born here, old, young. But they all came together because it brought people together. And that's what this is about, Mr Mayor. And I'd like to really congratulate the officers, the guide and myself and the other councillor, Councillor Raylene, through this, because they did it really diligently and they ticked it off. It wasn't rushed, it was done methodically. And for that I thank them, and they did it really well. But one of the great frustrations, Mr Mayor, is of course is that we did our work diligently. We consulted people, we assessed it and we thought about it and we did some more assessment and looked at it and took feedback and went backwards and forwards. But unfortunately, two of the areas are potentially going to be compromised by the North East Link, which is the Elgar Park Northwest area and Erin Park, and even the Frank Sedgman part, which is actually Manningham's but on our side of the freeway, if that makes sense. So I would foreshadow, Mr Mayor, that I'll be moving a motion in the future, and I was going to do an amendment tonight, but I don't want to take away from the substance of this, that we write to the tenant clubs at Harold Wilson, Coonung, and advise them that when the North East Link does, and if it does occur, that the Eastern Oval be made into an off-lead dog park. We'll make that a regulation. And also at Springfield Park West, were again considered. But when we lose our parkland, Mayor, we really need to do that. Because it's a great way to bring people together. And not only is it great for people, it's also great for dogs. I know we've all had residents that complain about barking dogs, but dogs that are exercised don't bark during the day, they don't chew things, they're better socialised, they're not as aggressive. It's a really great outcome. It was an election promise of mine. I listened to people, they told me they wanted it done, and we finally got it done. Council, this is good, support it.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the privilege of being on DAMP in my first year, actually, of being a councillor, and it's a great group. And it was identified then as well regarding the need for more off-lead areas in the municipality, and it's great to see the progress of that since then. As Councillor Barker and Councillor Carr mentioned earlier, it's great for the area considering, the increase in population and the increase of people owning pets, and the joys of owning pets as well is having an area to exercise them. As Councillor Barker mentioned, it's not only about the dogs, but also about the people as well. Socialisation, it's a social opportunity for people to meet, and for the health and well-being, both physically and mentally as well. I'd also like to commend the report and the assessment of the proposed areas. I do note two of them are in Elgar Ward, which is fantastic to see. So I certainly commend this report, and I urge my fellow councillors to do the same. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stennett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like it noted that this year is the year of the dog. I don't think it's any coincidence. It's actually the year I was born. You could probably work out when I was born by looking back at the zodiac. I don't think it's exaggeration to say that some residents have been hounding councillors. It's certainly given us pause for thought, and you'd have to be barking mad to vote against this.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? There being no speakers against the motion, I'm going to put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 947, tender evaluation, Whitehorse City Council, Microsoft licensing agreement renewal. I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Masood moved. Seek a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Bennett seconded. Councillor Masood.
We've had an existing MAV contract for the last 3 years, and the MAV recently completed a tender process and following evaluation selected 2 preferred suppliers from which council can choose as a channel partner. I guess many of us have noticed over recent years where we used to go and buy a licence for our computers that now they've all moved to annual licensing. The same thing is happening with cloud-based services, etc. So there is a change in that. And certainly as a large organisation, enterprise agreements are generally what we're looking at because they're aimed at large businesses and offer us significant cost savings. Benefits to council through an enterprise agreement include all future upgrades at no further cost. We get training credits and we get technical support and problem resolution. And there are always occasional problems. We had 3 options and the report explains that. It says do nothing, which of course would be a high risk. We then no longer have licences, etc. That's a security issue. We wouldn't want to do that. We could have continued an annual maintenance of the current product set, but software changes a lot and we do need to keep up to date and we need to have current support, and we also need to look at where we're moving as an organisation with our digital transformation. We will, as most businesses will, move to a more cloud-based environment, and thus the third option, which is to move to a cloud-centric enterprise agreement, is the one that is recommended. It allows for migration to web-based versions of Microsoft Office 365 and other cloud services. If we look at licensing for 700 users, over 3 years it's 935,000. We would probably continue, it says, to host our content on site, but eventually as our digital transformation strategy progresses, we'll be able to move to more cloud-based platforms. And I think this report just outlines clearly this sensible approach in looking at moving down that path and actually having the best service we can have. It's very important to have the provision for all of those platforms. It includes licensing for traditional desktop software and also for server-based software, and is clearly outlined in the report, so I commend it to councillors. It's something we really need to have in this modern day. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, Councillor Masood has covered the intent of this motion, but I'd just like to point out a couple of things. Certainly there is a cost increase in moving to option 2, the cloud-centric renewal option. So we're moving from a yearly spend of $228,000 to about $312,000. So there is a significant increase in expense. But I note that the benefits that will accrue because of this upgrade or this option that will follow. Along the lines of increased productivity, better customer service, reduced downtime, reduced errors and conflicts, risk mitigation, stable, reliable systems, better cost management and better service. So with those benefits, it's always, I think, a good thing to weigh up costs versus benefits. In my view, this is the modern way to move to a cloud-based system. There are numerous benefits. Yes, there is an increased cost, but in my view, the benefits far outweigh the increased cost. So on that basis, I support this motion. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no speakers for or against, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.8, live streaming of council meetings. I seek a mover.
Happy to
So
move.
moved.
Happy to second.
Councillor Bennett moved. Councillor Munro seconded. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Munro, I did get in first last week. Just beat you and beat you again. So this is very timely because, of course, Councillor Munro was embarrassed just a little while ago when his computer started playing tricks on him. So as of the 12th of November next month, the council meeting, these three cameras, 1, 2 and 3, will note everything that happens in this chamber. Now, it won't include the gallery, so you're safe there, but those cameras are all pointed towards us. So this is what will happen on the 12th of November. Next month, there'll be live streaming that will be available via internet devices for everyone to see us perform. So, you know, we currently have audio recordings that are uploaded the next day, I think, and the Mayor makes that note at the start of the meeting. Councillors, this will be live streaming. There's no delay. It will be happening in real time. So I think it's important that we actually understand that because in some ways I think it puts the pressure back on us to perform and to make sure that we do things in the correct manner. So the transparency side of things, I think, is a fantastic initiative in that it will allow members of the community, if they so desire, to be able to tune in to see a live performance from everyone around this table. Isn't that fantastic? It puts the pressure on us, though, that we've got to get it right. And look, I do have some concerns about risk management in regard to this because as councillors, we don't have the benefit of parliamentary privilege like our state and federal colleagues. However, the responsibility then, therefore, is not to stuff up, to be accurate in our statements, observe our protocols, and be respectful of others. So when you think about it, that's not a bad outcome, I guess, but we have to be mindful that we are responsible for our behaviour in this chamber. And it will be...
Mr Mayor, point of order just for a sec.
Okay, hang on. Councillor Carr, you've got a point of order?
I do.
Okay, can you briefly state the nature of your point of order, having regards to local law and what the point of order is about?
It's more a question, is Councillor Bennett suggesting that we don't do all of those things at the moment just because we're not in Parliament?
I'm gonna let Councillor Bennett continue because I can't work out what category that point of order falls into. Councillor Bennett, please continue.
Disrespect, perhaps.
I'm not going to continue that one. Councillor Bennett.
Bennett, but
Please continue, Councillor Bennett.
Okay. Okay, I'll just state again what I said before, that the responsibility lies with us to be accurate in our statements, observe protocols, and be respectful of others. I'm not saying that that is something that we haven't been doing, but it's just that we have to be mindful that we're being watched in real time by the public. So I guess that's the difference that I'm trying to make a point of. So I think it will assist with any particular poor behaviours that we might have witnessed during the time in the chamber, Councillor Carr. So I'm hopeful that it will be an improvement in our attitude and our diligence as far as making sure that we're accurate in what we say. So just one point that I'll say, that the chair or the CEO can suspend this live streaming at any stage for any particular reason. Maybe if code of conduct is being not followed, or for some other reason. So I think there are risks, but on balance, I believe the transparency in the behaviour is something that we should support. So I'd urge you to support this motion.
Councillor Munro.
Mr Mayor, I'm not sure if we have a point of order on relevance, and I probably was thinking about calling that on the mover, Councillor Bennett, because this report before us is about the development of a policy to support the live streaming. And so, yes, it does go to the issue of live streaming.
Councillor Munro, just pause. I just need to have one conversation at once. Please continue, Councillor Munro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this is about setting a policy that will drive the processes and practices around the live streaming. And we've already voted to accept cameras and live streaming, and as has been pointed out, they've actually already been installed, but we're about to do that. And it's a stepping stone beyond, it's an outcome beyond the stepping stone of the live audio recording that we have been doing for some time now. And I fully endorse Councillor Bennett's comments about I think it is a move to improve the transparency of council, because it does create a record of what goes on in this chamber, and people can assess that. And sometimes, perhaps adversely, when they repeat back to us words that we've mentioned at a previous meeting in terms of a debate, and perhaps sometimes that can be taken out of context. But I think it is a good discipline. It comes out of the Auditor General's report into behaviours at council, and so it is a positive step, and I congratulate officers on putting the policy together to help guide the introduction of the video and audio on top of the video, on top of the existing audio recording, and I commend the motion to councillors.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to go Councillor Stennett first, and then afterwards Councillor Barker. Councillor Stennett.
So thank you, Mayor. Look, I support this motion. I mean, it's a bit late now. I've been sort of fait accompli. We've already we've already installed the technology, but I support the idea of greater, I wouldn't say transparency. I think what it does is greater accessibility. In the Ombudsman's report, it talks about the fact that at the moment, even if you are audio streaming, if you're just recording and putting it later on the website, it's there, it's on record already. So I have to sort of disagree with Councillor Bennett in some regard. We're not already doing that. We do have a audio record of the meetings. It is on Council's website, but what it isn't being done is live streamed. Something we hadn't explored, and it's obviously a bit late now, but we didn't explore live audio streaming as opposed to video streaming, but that's the decision that Council's already made previously. So whether you the live audio stream or live video stream, not sure it really makes a difference. The issue is the fact that you're doing it live. The issue, you're not just recording it, putting it on a website later. People are able to access that meeting while it's being held. So for me, it's more of an issue of accessibility rather than transparency, because they're already, from my point of view, already is a record. It's an audio record that we already put on Council's website.
Seek a speaker against the motion. Seek a speaker in favour of the motion. Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor. One of my election promises, Mayor, was to provide greater transparency of council operations, and this was, again, an election promise of mine. And I don't want to get caught up in the minutiae of whether it's about transparency or access. It's actually about both in my eyes, and that is not everyone can actually get up to council offices, and if people want to sit at home and watch us instead of The Bachelor, Mayor, or any of the other high-rating television shows, I'm sure they will. But Ombudsman Glass's report, I believe, was a very, very important report, because the people, we work for the people, and the people should be able to see exactly what we do all of the time and understand why decisions are being made, because that builds confidence, Mr. Mayor, and that builds trust. And we all know that confidence and trust in Australian politics is at an all-time low. So if we can do it, now, we're not perfect, and we shouldn't pretend we are. Council officers are not perfect. We shouldn't pretend we are. Well, you know what? All of a sudden, we're going to let people in to watch every single thing that we say on a Monday night. And the arguments may not make sense to some people. The arguments may make a lot of sense to people. But it's an important step. And I just want to congratulate the council officers. So it's very easy to make an election promise that we should have live streaming of council meetings. It doesn't cost much. Well, as we've seen, there is a lot of due diligence to go through in terms of policy and process to get it right. I congratulate the officers for getting it right, and I welcome everyone that will be watching this. This is a great initiative. Please support it, councillors.
Any speakers against the motion? Any speakers in favour of the motion? Being no further speakers and no one spoke against the motion, I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 9.4.9, delegated decisions. August 2018. I seek a mover.
Happy to move.
Councillor Munro moved. I seek a seconder.
Happy to second.
Councillor Masood seconded. Councillor Munro.
As per the report, councillors and Mayor.
Councillor Masood.
Again, it's just procedural.
Any speakers against? Any speakers for? I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Now move to item number 10. Reports from delegates, special committee recommendations, Assembly of Councillor records. 10.1, reports from delegates. Councillors, only those councillors that have been appointed by councils and delegates to such reports to be received in this section. I'll start with Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mayor. I've emailed out my report. It's the Metropolitan Transport Forum on the 3rd of August. Just quickly, there was a report on the advocacy in the forums that were being held, so most of those had finished, averages over 100 at each one, and we did have a report last month on the Box Hill one. But I like the catchy line, congestion busting ideas that we're promoting in the lead up to the election. We had Alistair Cook from Transport Vic and Stephen Huxtable from Vic Roads talk about autonomous vehicles. There is a licensing system, so if you actually want to trial an autonomous vehicle on the road, you have to go and get a permit. But it is seen that I don't think we're going to have completely autonomous vehicles anytime soon, but there are, as the vehicles become more sophisticated and more autonomous, benefits include road safety, increased productivity and increased energy efficiency. So there will be the permit system. And just to conclude, councillors, if it is a software fault that leads to an infringement of any sort, it's actually the company that are responsible for the software are responsible for the infringement under the system.
Councillor Masood.
We had a Disability Advisory Committee meeting on the 3rd of October. We initially were looking at autism, but as a first thing on the agenda, and it brought us to some data that's available through the Australian Bureau of Statistics from a 2015 survey of disability, ageing and carers, where you can get some really good infographics that describe different demographics and the proportions of a disability, which is quite informative. We are also looking at the fact that this month there's quite a focus on mental health, and I should mention that there is, we have partnered with the Mental Health Foundation of Australia, and we are hosting Let's Talk Mental Health Forum on the 18th of October, which is Thursday this week, and it will be in the Whitehorse Centre. I think it's 9 till 12:30, and certainly it's something that we need to keep an eye on. We also had further discussions about the NDIS and how things were getting classified and the support people were having. There are still some issues, and I would encourage any residents who have problems in working through their program with the NDIA to perhaps contact council and see if they need any additional guidance, etc., or direction to someone who can help them with any issue they may have. Thank you.
Councillor Stennett.
Thank you. Nothing to report.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, Mayor, I have a report from the Whitehorse Business Group, which I attended with Councillor Liu on Tuesday the 9th of October. We looked at the profit and loss January through September, and we are down considerably on our membership subscriptions, which is an issue which we're constantly trying to deal with. Many people are actually just signing up for various events rather than actually signing the subscription. So that is something that we're currently working on at the moment. The Whitehorse Excellence in Business Awards are coming up on the 9th of November, and the various nominees have been interviewed in the last month for their to see if they'll be winning the awards. So that's been occurring at this time. They ran a laughter session at Box Hill Institute of TAFE, which was quite funny. Although it wasn't terribly well attended, and there's a look to try and match the number of people with the event. And people also mentioned at Box Hill Institute it was quite difficult to get to with parking. So all of these things are being taken on board by the Whitehorse Business Group. So that's about all I have to report. Thank you.
I have nothing to report. I'll go to Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I can't actually recall the date, I'm sorry, I did look, but a couple of weeks ago we had a Victorian Visual Arts Committee meeting, and unfortunately we didn't quite have a quorum. We did have some fantastic pieces of artwork to consider whether or not we should purchase, and we had a couple of wonderful ceramics and it was disappointing we didn't have a quorum. However, Jackie Nichols-Reeves, the curator, managed to email those that weren't at the meeting around the next day, and we did manage to get some favourable votes in favour of purchasing these artwork. It would have been a terrible remiss of council if they had not purchased these pieces of equipment. I can't actually describe them. I wish I had photos. One of them was a magnificent ceramics piece, and it was blue, and from all accounts, I'm not a ceramicist by any means, but from all accounts, for the ceramicist to obtain this blue colour in her kiln was something quite out of the ordinary and quite sensational. And it was really important that the committee put forward, this recommendation to purchase. And as I say, I'm pleased to say that we did. So next year there will be an exhibition, and all of these pieces will be on display. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mayor. The Eastern Transport Coalition met on Thursday the 20th of September at Yarra Ranges Shire Council offices. Council offices. So the remit currently with the Eastern Transport Coalition is to better educate the public and community in general about what the intent of the Eastern Transport Coalition is all about, and that is about promoting the best use of public transport. So you may have noted in the September Whitehorse News there was an article on the Better Buses in Whitehorse campaign. So that was mirrored by other articles with other municipalities in the eastern region to promote improvements in public transport, and Better Buses was one of those projects. With the state election coming up, the emphasis has been on getting answers from the three major parties on what their stance is on public transport, and in particular the 50 priority actions that have been identified by the Eastern Transport Coalition. And also moving into the federal election after November, we'll be then concentrating in the federal sphere. It was interesting to note that with the Eastern Metropolitan Partnerships that we're involved with, that Yarra Ranges Shire Council had an opportunity to brief members of the Eastern Metropolitan Partnership on behalf of the Eastern Transport Coalition. So it's good to see that there's some work being done on that front. So people like Michael Hopkins, Deputy Head of Transport for Victoria, was involved at that briefing involving the Metropolitan Partnerships. So that will continue with Transport for Victoria also being involved in these updates. So also with the Eastern Region Group, the Executive Officer of the Eastern Region Group has requested to come along to a future Eastern Transport Coalition meeting to better understand what the Eastern Transport Coalition is all about and what they're trying to do. So I see this as a positive move as well, that we get to better understand how we can get better outcomes as far as improvements in public transport within the Eastern region. Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
No report, Mayor.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 3 items to report. I'll start with the Whitehorse Business Group board meeting on the 9th of October, which Councillor Cutts had gone through quite thoroughly. Just one thing to add, I did attend the active networking event hosted by Whitehorse Business Group and Aqualink Box Hill. And yeah, it was a fantastic turnout. It was a different event to what most of us are used to. There are a number of different activation areas, and so I was, fully decked out in exercise gear, and yeah, everyone enjoyed themselves. It was great. We had perfect weather, and we were also very fortunate to have Matt Walsh as well, the Olympic swimmer, or former Olympic swimmer and champion, there to speak about his experiences, and yeah, it was overall a fantastic event. I also attended the Box Hill First meeting on the 8th of October, which the Mayor chaired, and a number of other councillors attended that as well. And it was an opportunity to get all the major stakeholders around the table, and we had a presentation from SGS Economics and Planning around Box Hill future urban trends, which was quite interesting, as well as an update around the Box Hill city development and some of the future works that we have in place as part of the budget process about looking at revisioning Box Hill and having sort of that Box Hill master plan moving forward. And finally, we also had a special meeting for the Library Board to reappoint the CEO, Sally Both, on the 19th of September. That's all from my end. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The EAHA, the Eastern Affordable Housing Alliance, is really gearing itself up for the last few weeks of the election campaign. We have had a number of meetings over the last 2 or 3 months, as I've previously indicated, and the latest one I had was on the 27th of the 9th with Samantha Dunn, who is the MLC for Eastern Area, Samantha Ratnam, the Greens president, who had initially tried to have a meeting with us, was not able to attend at that meeting, but we got a bit of a rundown on the Greens policy, and we're very much on the same page as we are for quite a few things, and I understand they've since released their policy. So we're going to keep plugging along between now and the 24th of November to get as many promises and commitments as we possibly can. I attended on behalf of Councillor Munro the Eastern Region meeting on Friday. I'm the substitute MAV rep, and we had the new president, who I had we had the existing president there, and we had the new CEO, Kerry Thompson, who I have yet to meet, in attendance, which was great, and all 5 municipalities were represented. And one of the main topics of discussion from several of the municipalities was the North East Link, and that was discussed by Manningham mainly, and Banyule had quite a bit to say about that. They've got similar concerns to ours, although obviously more localised. The other issue that was discussed at great length was public transport. Knox, of course, has got a great shortage there, and there's other concerns in Doncaster. The issue of affordable housing and social housing was also touched on by some of the municipalities, including Maroondah, that is currently, I think it was Maroondah, that's just updated their social housing policy. So I sort of came away from this with the realisation that all of our local municipalities are really lobbying on the same issues as we are. They're doing their advocacy based on the things that are important to us at Whitehorse. So that was it. Thank you.
Before I go to the vote, I did have a question on Councillor Carr's report, which I wanted to refer to the acting CEO. I noticed in Councillor Carr's report that there was not a quorum for the Visual Arts Committee, and then as a subsequent email around, there was a recommendation to purchase certain artworks, and I would like to understand how that fits within the terms of reference for the Visual Arts Committee and recommendations that flow from that. And
through the Mayor, thank you for the question. I'll have to take that on notice and come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I seek a mover to receive and note these delegate reports.
So moved.
Councillor Liu moved. I seek a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Bennett seconded. Is there any discussion? Those in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried unanimously. 10.2. Recommendations from the Special Committee of Council meeting of 8th of October 2018. There are none. So I'll move on to 10.3, Record of Assembly of Councillors. I seek a motion to receive and note the record. Councillor Stannett moved
Second.
and Councillor Cutts seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 11, reports on conferences and seminars. Councillors, are there any reports on conferences and seminars? I will commence with Councillor Ellis.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Liu.
Just one to report, Mayor, regarding the second Women's Forum for 2018, which was held on the 2nd of October. I was joined by a number of my female colleagues for this particular forum, and the topic was looking at addiction to recovery, and certainly was very inspiring to hear from people that have experienced that and shared their journey to recovery, as well as family members that have been directly affected by loved ones who have or had an addiction problem. So it was certainly very insightful.
Councillor Liu, I've heard a bit of chatter about questioning whether it's a conference or seminar, and I've given you enough latitude. If you can move to the next report,
right.
Thank you.
But well done team on the forum, thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor. On Saturday night, I attended a conference at the Mont Albert Cricket Club, which was...
I'll afford a similar amount of latitude, but very briefly.
It
very
was a
briefly.
men's health forum, Mr Mayor. It was presented by Detective Senior Sergeant Rowe from the Family Violence Unit. It was an outstanding night, and I congratulate the Mont Albert Cricket Club for their continued excellence in providing progressive services and conferences like that to people like myself, Mr Mayor. I'd encourage all to join in the future.
Councillor Bennett.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Carr.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, Mayor, I have attended a 6-day mediation course with the Dispute Settlement Centre of Victoria, and the reason for this was Councillor Carr, Councillor Liu and I attended VCAT a number of months ago and were shown various parts of the organisation and what they do there. I hadn't actually attended before, and part of that was the Dispute Settlement Centre of Victoria, which works as the Department of Justice and Regulation. And this course was fantastic. Certainly our planning consultation forums that we do, which can get very heated, especially when there's large numbers of people, and I think I've had up to 20, 25 in a forum, and we all know how that can get. And this mediation course is exactly what this was about, is being impartial, being open-minded, being unbiased, not giving solutions and letting the groups try and come to their own conclusions and satisfactory consensus between each other. So I personally found it excellent. It's a 12-step program, and if any of the other councillors would like to do it, it's something very worthwhile. So thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Stannett.
Thank you, Mayor. I haven't got any report, but I do know there's been a few that haven't really been, I don't think, conferences or seminars, and I just think that needs to be something we need to be more careful in the future.
Councillor Masood.
Well, I did attend a course at the Australian Institute of Company Directors on the board and the CEO. The facilitator was Nick Carr from Board Directions, and the course was to examine the relationship between the board and the CEO, providing guidance for boards to seek to identify good practices, knowing the different roles, improving the relationship between the board and the CEO selection and appointment, monitoring and reviewing CEO performance, and developing a CEO succession planning strategy. It was very interesting. It was a small group, probably about 12 of us. I think all of them were all on directors on boards, and from a variety of areas though. And it was a very interesting day, and certainly some very good discussions were had. Thank you.
Councillor Munro.
No report, Mayor.
And I have no report. Councillors, I seek a motion to receive and note these reports.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor Masood moved. Seconder.
To second.
Councillor Liu seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. We'll move on to item number 12, confidential reports. There are none tonight. Item 13, close of meeting. I now close the meeting, and this is my last council meeting as mayor of this term that I'm chairing. I'd like to thank my councillor colleagues for a year of respectful debate within the chamber, and I look forward to that continuing with me probably in one of these side ones, back next to Councillor Ellis in the chamber, being able to participate in numerous debates. So thank you very much and have a great evening.
Before you close the meeting, while the meeting's still open, can I say on behalf of councillors here, thank you very much for chairing the meetings. And we all know it's a difficult job sometimes, but I think you've handled the position
Point of order.
with great responsibility. So thank you very much.
I'll go to the point of order.
Not that I can raise it because the meeting, I think, is finished, but the meeting has finished, and there's opportunity, I believe, at the mayoral election
there is
to comment on your mayoral year. So I think that's the appropriate time to do it.
Thank you and good evening, everyone.